Well, hi, everyone. My name is Endre Jarraux Walls. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer for Customers Bank Corp and Customers Bank. And Customers Bank is a super regional financial institution with over $19 billion of assets that provides consumer, small business, and commercial financial services. Customers kept America's small businesses alive, providing over 213,000 loans during PPP for $4.4 billion and an average loan size of 22K. We're very proud of that because it was truly the small businesses and not your global chains and multinationals that got PPP funds to help them stay alive. I've served in all C-level roles as a chief information officer, as a chief technology officer, and now as a CTO. As a CISO. I've gained experiences working in various industries, including hospitality, new media and marketing, telecommunications, healthcare, and manufacturing. My experiences have helped me understand the criticality of creating cultures that provide the connective tissue between technology and business outcomes. So when asked what I do, I usually tell people that my job is to implement culture, which might sound a little weird for a CISO. I mean, CISOs usually will say, oh, my job is to secure the business. But I say that my job is to implement culture. And when I was focused on technology, my focus was on driving a culture that was technology adaptive, not technology dependent. As a security practitioner, my focus is on driving a culture that is inherently secure. But regardless of my focus, I'm driven by the idea that how we do what we do is more important than what we do. Understanding how is what enables you as an executive to drive culture, because the what isn't as important. Culture is driven by how. So today I want to talk to you about how you can drive as an executive and as a leader culture from your seat at the table. So let's define culture. And we'll start with a very simplistic definition of it. And we'll find our first clues there. Culture, simply put, is the way of life of groups of people, aka the way they do things. And understanding this simple definition gives us three things that we can focus on as leaders. First, culture is usually built over time. It isn't instantaneous, making it much harder to change the older the company. Newer orgs will find security culture easier to create, older orgs not so much. So you need to know your company, know the history, be able to work in and understand that culture gets built over time. Secondly, culture can exist in the small group dynamic as well as in the organizational context. There are subcultures or ways of work that I like to call work styles that exist. You have to find ways to integrate security principles into these work styles. And that's what we'll be talking about today. And lastly, part of culture is convenience. Like it or not, the things that make it more difficult to achieve a given task are less likely to influence the culture than the things that enhance people's individual work styles or the group work style. Your initiatives and cultural elements have to achieve that design objective. So a couple of talking points when it comes to culture. First, the best cultures tend to make tradition feel like a framework instead of feeling like the way things are done. When you're in one of those cultures, when you're not getting people telling you, well, this is the way that we've always done it, right? And the balance that you have to strike there is being able to help people understand that new ways of work don't necessarily disenfranchise all that they've built up into a specific point, but can enhance their work style. And in the case of the security context, which is really what we're trying to achieve, getting people to understand how they can integrate secure principles into their everyday work style helps to generate a much more secure organization. Another thing is that the small group dynamic is just as important as the whole. Remember that workflows exist in roles as well as departments. And I think we all know this. When folks gravitate towards one another, it's generally because they have a shared experience and they're in generally the same role. So you'll find programmers will hang out with programmers, network guys hang out with network guys. I mean, generally nerds all get together. But there are those subgroup dynamics that exist because, hey, this person is working on the same stuff that I am, and they're dealing with the same stressors that I am, and they have the same issues that I do. And so culture gets created in those small group dynamics, those small group work styles. For some businesses, the culture is actually the absence of culture, meaning that the loss of a few people and or the addition of new people changes the work style for many. These organizations, it's easy to figure out. You usually have a decent amount of turnover. If we're honest with ourselves about the places where we work, we know that there's sometimes a vacuum of culture. Might be in specific departments, it might be in the organization as a whole because of the leadership style of people who are at the top. These realities shouldn't change the dynamic for you as an executive. You as an executive should say to yourself, the general dynamics of the organization be damned, I'm going to implement a culture that increases the inherent security of the organization around all of those dynamics. Because in doing that, we create that first line defense that is truly more important than it used to be. I think 20 years ago, our focus as security practitioners was on securing the things, the technology, the network. You want to shrink the attack surface. You want to secure all of the devices, and you want to make sure that the endpoints are straight. You want to make sure that you've placed all of the necessary controls throughout the organization. But I think now, at least in the last couple of years, we're realizing that the biggest attacks are the result of someone making a mistake. They clicked a link on an email that they shouldn't have. They gave too much information on a phone call with someone that they thought was who they said they were. They, in some cases, got into a relationship with someone in social media who they thought was legit, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of different things there, but the majority of our attacks are coming from that personal, individual vector. And so we have to use culture to create a framework that helps people think differently about those interactions in social media, about what they do when they see an email that they don't recognize or a link that they're not sure what it is, how they communicate with the security organization. I think security can't be the department of rules anymore. My favorite analogy to use is that your security organization should be a fire company, not a police department. With the difference being that, if you look in the news and everything, everyone wants to tell police departments how to do their jobs, right? Everyone thinks they know how to do policing. And it's generally because police are there for enforcement. They're there for the law. And so people tend to have ideas around that. You don't ever see anyone on TV telling firefighters how to fight fires, telling fire chiefs how to manage firefighting policy. As a security department, you want to be a group of firefighters. You want to be responsible for prevention, handing out those smoke alarms and making sure that people feel safe and do safe things. And creating this culture around security creates that culture of safety that allows people to more constructively be part of securing the organization instead of just expecting you to do it for them. And when things break, it's all on you. Having an impact is not a horizontal across the C-suite type activity. It needs to be a vertical one as well. So, if you're one of those CISOs or you're a CIO who tends to work horizontally with other officers in the organization, you're missing 75% of the effort that it takes to build a secure culture. And the reason for that is executives will almost always understand what you're trying to say, what you're trying to impart. And executives will have an easier time finding comfort in what you're trying to say. It's the individuals whose work style is being impacted. When you implement some new phishing training program, your C-suite executives are not as affected as the everyday folks who are working in your organization. You're building culture for them. So it needs to be a vertical exercise as well as a horizontal one. You get the buy-in from your peers and you create opportunities for new outcomes, leveraging security as part of the culture for everyone else below. And the best changes happen when no change is felt. We have to remember the importance of seamless integration of security concepts to make not only the culture work, but the adoption of security controls, of secure technologies, et cetera. When folks don't feel that there's a change happening, there's nothing for them to rage against. I think we all know that generally speaking, human nature is to push back against change. It's just one of those things that we do inherently. There's lots of reasons for it, and I won't get into all the psychology of it, but it is important to know that change tends to create reaction. So if we can find ways to make changes happen culturally without creating the feeling that a whole bunch of things are changing, you'll get much better adoption out of the employees in the organization. So how about we define security? I think we all know this definition, right? Technically, security is defined as all of us, everyone who's watching this, because that's what we do. But let's break down the definition for some important clues around how we can impact culture. Security is the state of being free from danger or threat. So security protects the business from threat of closure or disruption, free from the danger of outsiders who would steal or interrupt the business regardless of motive. Security is often viewed by everyone, even all of us as CISOs and CIOs, as the collection of things that provide this freedom from danger or threat. They're the tangible: firewalls, or IDS, or XDR, microsegmentation, zero trust, MFA, encryption, et cetera, training. And when we view security in this way, it's because we're concerned with security as what instead of how. Remember, I had said before that culture is about how. The what isn't as important. So in this moment, think about the perception the employees in your company have of your security organization. Do they think of you as a police department? Do they think of you as the military? Because I've seen some that definitely take a militaristic approach to security with very stringent rules. You have some that are almost religious with commandments and thou shalt nots. And you have a few who are good at being fire departments, right? The majority probably think of your org as smart tech folks who you only interact with when something is wrong. That, just from a cultural standpoint, has you already having lost the war. If folks are only reaching out to you when they're certain that something's wrong, you have to worry about their context and their understanding of what wrong is. And a lot of times, for them, it's a disaster moment. It's the screen already says that I got to pay $5,000 to get my information back. That to them is wrong. Getting an email from someone they've never met or heard of before, telling them that their credit card is overdue and perhaps a credit card they don't even have, doesn't strike them as something wrong. And so while they may not click on the link, they'll probably just delete it. And that does not help you from a cultural standpoint either. So, that perception is probably that everything is going well when you don't hear from security on the other side, right? That, security should be out of sight, out of mind until something breaks or something's wrong. That perception is part of culture too. And our general goal has to be to change that. So how does the definition of security apply to those employees, right? Security is meant for them. The idea of being free from danger or threat is part of making sure that we can have the intersection of security and culture and be able to create that. I'm going to take a minute to describe the psychology of human beings here, because that is a large part of what makes culture work or not work. And people are motivated by a few things. If you're like me and you took a few psych courses out of sheer curiosity, you might remember this guy. The Olympics are around the corner, but this is not Bella Caroli. This is Abraham Maslow, who created the relatively well-known Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But to be honest, I took psych to make sure being a psychologist wasn't something I wanted to do. I come from a family of psychologists and chose to forgo that family business to be a tech executive. Everyone is invited to my home for Thanksgiving. The discussions are amazing and very lively. But I've always been into the psychology of individuals and how that plays into what I do. So I want to share a little bit of that with you. It is hard to disagree with Maslow's overarching idea that people are generally motivated by 5 key needs. There's physiological, which is food, water, and sleep. Safety, which is security, health, and finances. Love or belonging, which is friendship, intimacy, family, connections. Esteem, which is respect, status, recognition, strength. And then self-actualization, which is meeting one's concept of full potential. So these are all very individualistic things. And this is a chart. I modified this just a little bit because I think we all know that Wi-Fi is sort of the 6th need in the hierarchy, especially if you have children or teenagers, or if you spent any time on a hotel's Wi-Fi trying to get work done. You know I'm right. So I put that as the 6th area in the hierarchy of needs. But these needs make up who we are as human beings, which is the theory anyway, and I think it's an accurate one. So what does this have to do with culture? These needs make up culture. So for example, conversations tend to happen around the water cooler or at the lunch table, which is physiological. People who have job security, which is safety, tend to be happier workers. We know this. Studies have been done about it, and I don't know why, because it's a pretty obvious thing. The sense of belonging is what makes people stay with your company and causes them to achieve. That feeling of accomplishment and getting recognition for it when they're achieving is that self-esteem area. And that's what makes people push themselves to reach their full potential for self-actualization. So these things all play. This is all part of culture. And these things all play into how we build a culture for an organization. The best companies have figured out that meeting people's needs consistently drives a culture where employees will achieve breakthrough outcomes for no reason other than because they enjoy being a part of that company. And we know what those companies look like. We know who they tend to be. You know, it doesn't mean that you won't still hear complaints out of them, but people who work for Google love working for Google. People who work in the business side of Amazon tend to love working in that company. Same thing for Microsoft, same thing for Dell. These companies have figured out that culture is when you're able to combine the 5 needs for individuals and consistently meet those needs, consistently provide recognition, consistently provide opportunities for people to have to achieve in their roles, to find new roles, to improve their positions, consistently enable people to enjoy themselves in social settings. And you'll notice that these companies have really cool lunchrooms, and a lot of them have workout rooms and opportunities for people to do things like play shuffleboard and foosball. All of those things go into culture. When you drive a culture where people feel like and enjoy being part of the company, all kinds of outcomes from tech adoption to retention to inherent security can happen. Now, if you think about it, we spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in a culture outside of our own families and homes. So if you get 8 holidays, 12 vacation days, that's 1,920 hours a year. And in my view, the key performance indicator for every executive should be how well they can drive breakthrough outcomes by creating and nurturing and effective business culture. And the same thing goes for all of us as security executives. So let's put it all together. One, we know that culture is the way of life or work style of groups of people. Two, we know that security is the state of being free from danger or threat. Three, we know that human beings have needs. Meeting those needs encourages them to perform. Consistently encouraging people to perform results in breakthrough outcomes regardless of the outcome one's looking for. And four, we know that inherent security is security that becomes part of the work style. So let's put it all together. We're trying to build this first line defense that is people-centric, where individuals are leveraging security concepts as part of the culture. They might not even realize that they're doing it. An example that I can give you, and I'm not boasting, but at customers, we have around 800 employees. We've developed a phishing program where we test for fish every month. And I will tell you that our tests are really good. We do everything from, a LinkedIn, hey, you need to change your password sort of deal, to a Gmail, hey, there's a voicemail waiting for you, et cetera, et cetera. 98%, and recently last month, 99% of our employees pass the test. They recognize the fish, they report it, they delete it, they don't interact with it. It's huge. They don't even realize it anymore. When we first started doing it, everyone was complaining. What are these emails? Why are you trying to test us? Why are you guys being jerks? When it came down to it, we built it in as part of the culture. And part of that culture was changing people's work styles to pay more attention to the inputs to their mailbox. Something very simple, something very rudimentary. And individuals in our company pay close attention to their emails because for them, that is part of the everyday work style, right? It's now ingrained in what they do as individuals. So when we put this all together, what we end up with is a security culture. And the security culture is one where we, as practitioners, insert those security concepts that augment the work style of teams and organizations in a way that is not directly felt and therefore has a lasting and positive impact. To meet the physiological need, information that educates and informs is placed in areas where people have conversations. So it might seem kludgy, but you know that folks are in the lunchroom, you know that they're around the water cooler having conversations, the Keurig, et cetera. There's nothing wrong with putting signs there that talk about security concepts. Eventually, people start seeing those and recognizing them, and they become ingrained in their mind. You're meeting the physiological need of communication. You're educating and informing people. This includes establishing a regular communication that doesn't hand down edicts or attempt to strike fear, which would be the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to give people security. So we don't want to strike fear. We don't want to tell them, hey, ransomware hits, you're going to ruin the company and get fired. This is where we want to be able to say, this is what ransomware does. This is how it gets into the company. These are things that you can do to keep yourself safe. It's not even necessarily about the company. It's about you as an individual. You're meeting someone's physiological need. And communications that share information and make the idea of being secure less of a technical thing and more of a personally achievable goal work. One example that I'll throw out there about the physiological need and how important that is to adoption is a while ago, I was able to get everyone in an organization that had 5,000 employees to use their own cell phones instead of corporate cell phones. We implemented a BYOD program. And one of the ways that we were able to do that was by letting everyone know that their personal cell phones, not only would they be able to receive reimbursement for their service, but that if something happened to their phone, if it was lost or missing, we could track it for them and we could erase it for them if they had lost their device. Well, now we've created something personal for people that if their phone falls in the wrong hands, they don't have to worry about details around their family or their address or their personal information or pictures that they may have taken would fall into the wrong hands. By making it more of a personal thing, it was easier to implement a security program. So that program was all about security for us. It was making sure that we didn't have people accessing public side resources using their personal cell phones that might be ridden with malware and other issues. In the background, they had no idea that this was a security thing. For them, it was positioned as something we did for them. And so we met that physiological need. To meet the safety need, the culture should enable people to take control of their own security. You can do this in communications where you explain methods for things like developing good password habits. Talk to folks about what they can do in their own home situations to secure their PCs. Recently, Amazon made, in my opinion, the colossal mistake of default enabling that home network thing of theirs. I forget what the name of it is. But it was a terrible idea. And in my opinion, created a lot of security issues for a lot of people who weren't necessarily aware that a security issue was there. As a security department, did that have anything to do with us? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But we put out some communication to let folks know that it happened, to let them know how they can change it, how they can turn it off, and what some of the risks are. And people were very, very appreciative of us sharing that information with them. That helps meet their safety need. And those communications are extremely important in changing the narrative from your security department being a police department that no one wants to, outwardly talk to a fire department. Everyone wants to bring their kids to the fire department to see the fire engines. They want to talk to firefighters, et cetera. It is a completely different psychological concept that you're working with here and how people view your security organization. Take that to the next level and create opportunities for people to create connections with others in the office based on things like who uses Gmail, who's interested in how cyber attacks work. And then you can meet the belonging need. And that need is where you get people together on their commonality. And everyone has that. So it's very, very important to do that. You can remind people that security is just a department that can only succeed with their help and support. Remind people of how critical they are in keeping the organization secure. Training should not be focused to your own teams. Train your employees, especially the ones who consider themselves to be technologically handicapped. Those are the best ones to train because you're giving them a opportunity for self-actualization, which is important to us all. Providing recognition programs from that training that reward people who participate, who are successful in things like phishing campaigns, security awareness month programs, et cetera, meets the esteem need. One of the things that, and I see a question about what type of security awareness do we provide to the first line? And I'll tell you that when it's National Security Awareness Month, of course, we do the every week drumbeat, and we have it's almost like a sweepstakes where folks can answer some questions, and we randomly choose a couple of winners. We've given away tons of prizes, everything from like Amazon Fire Sticks to drones. I think we gave a GoPro away one year. One of the things that, and our company's gotten to a point even through the pandemic where they look forward to National Cyber Awareness Month. And that's a cultural thing, right? You have folks enrolled in security, and sure, they're getting something for it, but it is part of the culture to them. It is important to them. It's something that they actually look forward to. And there's all kinds of opportunities that you can use throughout the course of a calendar year to be able to influence people from that standpoint. Awareness campaigns are always great, especially when you can do fun games on the back end and be able to give away prizes and get people engaged. And we've had a very, very easy time of doing that. Now, I will tell you that the self-actualization need can be difficult to meet because it's so much more individualistic than all the other needs. But you will start to notice individuals with an interest and perhaps an aptitude for security as you build this security culture. Maintaining your metrics and data around your culture program will bear out results like this over time. So you'll be able to know who are your most consistent anti-phishers, who are your most consistent good password people, who, pays attention to all of the awareness campaigns and always competes in all of the different games for prizes and stuff like that. Harnessing the interest with cross-training programs and inside internships helps you develop a new talent inside a new source of talent inside your new culture, where you can actually find people who have an aptitude but don't have the training. Well, now you've given them interest. And this typically happens in tech departments, but it can happen elsewhere too. Believe me, especially if you have technical risk areas or program, documentation type people. You can always pull other people in from other departments, because now you've got a culture where everyone is focused on and aware of security, and they don't even realize that it happened, right? And now we're creating connective tissue between what used to be a black box department to an organization that is part of the heartbeat of it. Companies with a security culture have zero trouble ensuring a consistent flow of support and resources to their security department, and are significantly less likely to fall prey to cyber attacks that originate from the human vector, especially when it comes to social attacks and misdirection. Your employees become your first line defense, but to them, being secure is just status quo. So I want to answer another question that came in about, can I name some of the types or methods that I use to implement security in our company where there is no pushback? I'll tell you that because we've built a security culture, we've gotten to a place where there's never any pushback. At this point, teams inside of our organization know that three things have happened when we try to implement a new security program or technology. That we've well vetted the technology and that we are certain that it will fit into the organization seamlessly. We have a track record now, right? So part of building that culture is creating that track record. People know that we are sensitive to and focused on their individual work styles, their team and group dynamics, what their departments do. We get engaged with them as parts of the organization. So we take time to meet with those teams and ask them, how we can help. We will bring up different security concepts to them and get them enrolled in it, instead of it just coming down as, hey, we're doing this to you today. Instead, we get involved, we use our PMO, we communicate the change to the organization, we explain the benefits, we give a forum for asking questions. No question is stupid. All of these things are part of security culture. It's an inclusive environment where you can establish a consistent record of engagement with employees to the point where they feel like they're part of the security program too. That's what you really want. That's what you're really going for here. And so once you've built this culture, recognizing that it'll take time. It took us roughly a year and a half before we got to the place where we are now, especially with our phishing program. We kept at it because our numbers weren't always this good. And we did have people who would be first and second time offenders. We'd put them through training. We've evolved the training over time using feedback, which again helps with people's need for being able to communicate and feeling like they're part of that belonging, that they're part of something bigger than them. And so enrolling people in those conversations is extremely important. Once you get to that point, pushback becomes non-existent because everyone's a part of it now. Everyone's interested in seeing the success. That's what culture does for you in and of itself. Adding security to that culture makes your job a lot easier. So I want to thank you all so much for listening to this talk. And if we can open the floor for questions.
Okay. I think I'm back. Yep. Hi, Andre. Sorry about that snafu. And to all of our viewers, I had just commented to our production team that I needed to plug my laptop in, but I had 15 minutes. Well, my Dell computer that I only use for these events decided otherwise and cut me off. So sorry about that. But I love how you're talking about the culture and what you're doing. We have this conversation often because we get these CISO roundtables. I was telling you about these happy hours, and we have different CISOs telling their opinions of what they're doing for their teams. And there are some, punitive actions out there, and that just doesn't seem to be helping the culture when you're having punitive action. So I think what you guys are doing is great. And I would think that our audience would think the same thing. Most of the questions, it looks like you've already answered. I think that you already answered about what type of security awareness do you provide to all. And then is there anything that you're doing if that same person, you're doing more training, but what if it gets to, 4 or 5, that they keep not following your guidelines? What actions will you finally take if they're just not getting it?
Your executive sponsorship is really important. And so, when we say that you have to work vertically as well as horizontally, working horizontally enables you to meet with executives. You can provide them with metrics. So it's not just, Andre reached out and he's not happy about this guy. Instead, we're presenting data and we have an individual who's not getting it. Now, we have had instances where we've had people who are repeat offenders and they don't show up to training. And those people eventually are let go. One of the interesting things about that, though, is because we have this culture, the other individuals that they work with are sort of like, wow, what was that guy's problem? Mm-hmm. This stuff is so easy. This is who we are as a company. You're working counter to culture. Why are you doing that? And I think that becomes a very powerful reality when you have folks working towards the same goal and they all feel like they're a part of something really big, especially something that is technologically driven like security is. You have enhanced for them their work experience. You've almost made them part of the security department, which people love, right? They love the idea that now there's this big technical thing and they're a component of it. They're not the subjects of it. They're a component of it. And I think that mindset difference is what makes you successful.
Well, and if you go to the FutureCon website, we have it all over the place that, IT is no longer, cybersecurity is no longer an IT problem. And 3 years ago, when FutureCon launched, that's, what we launched with. But 3 years later, it really is not just an IT problem. It's on the news every single day. So I think, more people, you've been in the industry for a long time. I've been in the industry for a long time. That was like what people think we do. It's not what we just do anymore. It's what everyone has to do. So excellent presentation. I don't have any other questions, but I do want to let our attendees know that Andre will be on the platform. So if you guys have any questions, you can go chat with him. He'll be, you can go to the network lounge. And what's the best way, Andre, for people to get a hold of you if they have any questions for you? LinkedIn, probably.
Yeah, you can always hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm definitely there, and feel free to send me an invite and we can always chat.
Well, Endre Jarraux Walls, thank you so much for being here today. And he is going to be joining the panel that's going to be happening shortly at 11:40. So thank you for that time you spent with us, and we'll chat with you a little bit on the panel.